Oh, there you are.
Here I am, rocking like a hurricane. I don't know.
I wasn't expecting.
You ever heard that song?
I have, but I wasn't expecting that particular reference. I thought Here I Am would be like, speak, Lord, your servant is listening or something. It's a Catholic podcast after all, Matthew.
Considering. It really goes to show where my mind's at, because the New York Rangers, as we record, are playing the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah. So actually, I wanted to ask you about that. How are you feeling right now?
Great.
Okay.
They won game 1 of round 2. I only got to watch the first period of the game yesterday. Most of the time, our audience doesn't know like the exact day we record. If you follow the Rangers schedule, you will now know exactly the day we are recording.
Yeah, right on.
But I watched the first period, and only the first period, and the first period happened to be when they scored 3 out of 4 of their goals.
Oh.
And so it was quite fun.
That's an exciting game to watch.
Yeah, it was exciting. I would say the funniest part is that for those who are unfamiliar, hockey has a set of rules where if you commit a penalty, you go to the penalty box. That's 2 minutes, right? But there is an additional rule.
Matt, I think everybody's at least aware of the penalty box.
No, well, I'm not sure if people know this. If you commit a penalty and the other player bleeds, it's a 4-minute penalty, which I think is a funny like addendum to the rule. Well, 2 minutes, but if they're bleeding, 4 minutes.
No blood, no foul,
4-minute timeout. Yeah, And so there is a thing that hockey fans will do, which is if they see one of their own players take a high stick, they'll basically hope they're bleeding because they see the guy is fine, but if like his lip is bleeding a little bit, it's twice the penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And so my grandma was watching this game with us, and she is not a hockey fan at all. And by the end of the first period, she was telling Renee, my wife, that she felt like she was in the Coliseum watching people root on gladiators. And we were all like, we're not super proud of this, but you're right.
Yeah. Are you at all worried about hockey basically completely scandalizing your grandmother now? Like this could really do some damage to her.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that. She's seen me at worse than watching hockey. So
all right.
I think I'm fine there. Anyway, so the Rangers are doing good, and it has been a fun time to watch them. So
well, I figured that it would be a happy thing for you if the Rangers were doing well, and I was kind of curious. I haven't had a chance to look at the newspaper or to look at ESPN or anything like that the last several days, so really truly have no idea. Other than I know the Mets lost yesterday, which was that was a bummer, but I didn't watch the game anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's it's not the playoffs yet, right?
It's
the season just started.
We're still early in the year. I mean, as we record, of course, this will come out.
Yeah.
This will come out at a time when we need to start worrying a lot more about the Mets. But
right, and hopefully the Rangers will have won the Stanley Cup. Anyway,
we'll see if your predictions come true.
Today we are not talking about sports.
No,
that
that's
was
not the
prior
intention.
Episode with Dr. Matt Hoven.
That was a fun conversation, though. I'll tell you.
It was.
That was a good time.
So if that's something you're interested in hearing about, you should go to that episode.
You should also listen to this one, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like listen to all of them
today. Please, no. I'm just
we want our listens to go.
We're
up.
groveling.
Yeah, please pay attention to us.
We're talking about the vice of pride and the virtue of humility. So,
can I start with a lyric, though?
Yeah, please.
The Avett Brothers, who I love very much, and I don't know if we can afford to get a clip of their song here, but if we can, it'd be great. But there's a line that they have in one of their songs that goes, "I want to have pride like my mother has, but not like the kind in the Bible that turns you bad." And I think that in a very short verse, they have captured like the challenge of pride. Right? The challenge of pride, because pride, the kind in the Bible that turns you bad, that vice of pride, that overweening pride that makes you think that you're the end all and be all of everything. Obviously, that's a huge problem. But then there's the proper kind of pride to be proud of your children for what they've done, to be proud of yourself for having accomplished something or having done a good thing. Like there's a certain type of pride that is actually appropriate. But this is where, when we talk about the virtue of humility, that might actually be the thing that gets us to that proper ordering of pride. And maybe that's also a function of our language, right? We could talk about a lot of different things with how our language fails, because we only have one word and we have to use it both positively and negatively, sometimes at the same time.
Right.
Like, I'm not proud of my pride. Wait a second.
Right. And it's usually like a fairly strong emphasis too, you know?
Yeah.
If you are really proud of something, that means, that means something. And if you are struggling with pride, again, it's not like neither word indicates a borderline, either or is all I'm trying to get across.
Well, because then we can also say this with humility, right? There's humility properly ordered, and then there's something that we might mistake for humility that is actually a very disordered way of behaving. We think, well, out of humility, I shouldn't be acknowledged, I shouldn't be recognized, and so we end up hiding or isolating ourselves. There can be a sense of humility that goes way beyond anything that's really healthy or normal. So yeah, we got a lot there. Where do you want to start?
Right. I think I want to start with. So the temptation is to say, like, what is the antidote to pride? Or,
humility.
Of course, right. That's the problem, which is that. It's
okay,
really
episode's over. Thanks
answer.
for listening, everybody. Really appreciate you.
So as opposed to what's the antidote, maybe how does one identify pride within themselves? Because I feel like when I've gone to confession, right, and I think there are other Catholics who feel this way. It's like, what is one of the sins you always confess? Well, I've been proud. And I'm not saying I shouldn't confess that, because the good Lord knows I've been proud, but rather it's so general, like I'm not even necessarily thinking of specific instances when I say that. It's just like, I know that's at the root of all of my sin, is me being proud. And so in the tangible, how does one identify pride and I know it's humility, but change. How do you change?
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, maybe I'll start with something that I heard just this past weekend.
Okay.
I was at a conference and I had the chance to meet Mother Natalia.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, she's amazing. Let me tell you something. Like, in person, she's just the most wonderful, amazing person. So listen to her episodes on Pints with Aquinas. Check out her podcast, What God Is Not, that she does with Father Michael Laughlin. She's the real deal. Anyway, something that Mother said in her talk in the conference was that we want to try to cultivate a sense of watchfulness. And watchfulness means like appropriate vigilance and appropriate awareness of what's happening within. And when we have that sort of sense of watchfulness, we can see what's really going on. And one place where, if we're being watchful, if we're examining the feelings that we have, the emotions that we have, if we're examining the thoughts that are crossing our mind, either as they happen or even after the fact, to say, like, you ever ask yourself, what was I thinking? Like, what the heck
Father,
was I thinking when I did
myself
that?
Every day.
See? Exactly. But if we do that, we kind of have that watchfulness over ourselves. It can lead us to identify sometimes the things that are happening. We might notice, I think a lot of times pride manifests itself not as, I think I'm better than you, or I'm the one who has to be the center of everything. But it's actually more like willfulness. But I want this. I want to make this decision. I want to be the one who picks where we have dinner. I want to be the one who is applauded by my coworkers for the good work that I've done. I want this thing to work out in this fashion, and my willfulness might start to appear when, hey, maybe we did something, and this might happen at work, right? there's a project, you put out an idea, the idea gets rejected. Your boss, the other people that you work with decide to go in a different direction or do something differently. And having decided to do something differently, to go in a different direction, it doesn't really work out. And then they end up adopting your idea, forgetting that it was your idea. You don't get the credit for the idea, but they end up doing the thing that you told them to do in the first place. Right? And you go, well, I should be the one getting the credit.
Right.
You're not wrong that it was your idea. You're not wrong that you were the one who proposed it. And you're also not wrong to have wanted that to happen because you wanted something good.
Right. Right.
But it's really easy to start just spending all your time thinking about how you deserve the credit or how
Right.
you should have had this done that way in the first place. And then it becomes willfulness. Like this is about my idea. It's about what I want.
So is willfulness basically self-centeredness?
It can be.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
I mean, I suppose it does.
Right.
There's other ways, I guess, where it's maybe self-centeredness, but without realizing that it is. Like I could be very willful about wanting one person to have a job or to have a role to play. And I want to promote this person. I want my guy in there, you know? And so I'm not the one who's going to do it. I'm not the one who's going to have to do the labor or the work or anything like that. But I know that I want my person in there doing this thing. And so I'm not really thinking about myself. I'm actually thinking that this would be good for him. You know, so like Matt, if I want you to get promoted, if I want you to have something, and I'm really pushing, no, Matt's the right guy. You got to pick Matt. You've got to have him doing this. It's because I want something good for you. Yeah. But I can also start,
which isn't a bad thing. So that can't be pride.
Right, exactly. So it's not bad that I want what's good for you. That's
Right.
love, right? That's the definition of
Right.
love, is willing the good of another.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if that becomes my whole focus, is I've just got to get this for him. Anything else starts to feel like maybe a threat to me. Like, man,
Right.
they're not giving me what I want. This isn't right. And I'm now willing Matt in to this particular position, to this particular job.
Right.
But that's not necessarily good for him. It's now about what I have decided is good for you. So you'll see this happen a lot with it happens with parents, right? It can happen in a mentorship relationship where like I'm the boss and I'm mentoring this employee and I just want them to do this. Actually, in Parks and Rec, okay, let's use a pop culture reference, right? Parks and
Yes,
Rec.
as we should.
Yeah.
As we should.
Yeah.
I'm almost a little disappointed in us that it's taken this long.
I know. Well, there's a great scene between Leslie Knope and April Ludgate, where Leslie has basically decided all these different things. She's got literal binders full of projects and progress that April is going to make. And she's laying out all this stuff that she wants April to be able to do. But none of it is interesting to April. It's all interesting to Leslie.
Right.
It's all stuff that Leslie would be great at, that Leslie wants. And she wants April to be just like her for a moment.
Right.
And when April finally works up the courage to say to her, like, that's not what I want, though. Leslie has to let go of it. But then she also realizes that she foresaw that too. Like, I think if I'm remembering the scene correctly, she like turns to a different page in her notebook, in her binder, and she's like, and this is where you finally decide to do what you want. And something like that.
Right.
But there's
Right.
this habit that we'll have of I want something for somebody else. And because I want that thing for them, I can't see what they need. And that's a form of pride because it's my desire, my preference over and above anybody else's.
So to build on your definition of love, I would say love is willing the good of the other for the sake of the other. And pride then is can be at least, right? Love can turn into pride when it's willing the good of the other for my own sake.
Yeah, I think anything that turns back to for my own sake
is
going to eventually have its root in pride. And we talk
Right.
about
Now-
that. Money is the root of all evil, but pride goes before the fall. So we start to fall, we start to fail because we become prideful.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, it's almost like it's just a difficult road to tread on, like in the sense that it's easy to want to will the good of another person, and then to be so emotionally invested in it, that it becomes about you. And I wonder if I wonder if that impacts like the power of prayer, because it says in not the Gospels, I think it's in James, that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful. Um, and if you are praying for something for the wrong reason being I want this, as opposed to I love them, I wonder if that impacts the power of prayer, because there have been plenty of people for various situations that I have identified, like, well, I think that their life would be better this way, and like, for the sake of argument, because I'm not being specific, truly, because I think it is so many different times. Like, it could be something as simple as like, this person like is a drug addict, and so their life would be better if they weren't a drug addict, and so like, if you begin to be so invested in that for your own sake, well, it would make my life easier, I imagine that would impact the power of prayer. Of course, that's the call to cultivate humility.
Yeah, right.
Which is so difficult.
Well, but so here's a great thing with that. Humility allows you to accept that the other person, or the fact that there is another person out there, that you're not the only one, that you're not responsible for everything. You can still desire and will something for someone else, but you can also accept that that other person has to have a corresponding desire for it, has to be willing to also make this or that effort, right? I heard
that's theology of the body, right?
And well, there's the complementarity that we talk about in theology of the body, right? The complementarity of man and woman, and the fact that you're loving the other for their own sake and for their own good, and not just. And
you
for
can
your
want
own
a good for them, but they have to want it as well. That's when it becomes common,
right?
Like, you have to. It's just that free will thing. Oh.
The free will thing is hard, but so here's humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself so much as thinking about yourself less. That was in a TV show once. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think it's accurate.
Yeah, it's
was it Parks and Rec? That's the real question.
I don't think it was Parks and Rec. No, it was something else.
It was probably The Office. No.
Definitely not. It's thinking about yourself less. So it's not to put, like, I don't have to put myself down and say I'm no good. I'm really terrible. I'm there are some things that I'm bad at. That's true. Yeah. And I can say that, but I'm observing an objective fact then. It's not like, compared to you, Matt, I'm bad at piano.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because you know how to play the piano and I don't. And so when I say that, I'm not putting myself down. I'm simply stating the truth. Right. And I can say that without any pride and without any desire to build up your pride in the fact that you're a good piano player.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. My head is huge right now.
Yeah, well, I want you to be praised for being good at music, right? I think that's a good thing for you. But
yes.
I don't have to, in order to promote you, I don't have to put myself down. And that's also not really humility. This comes up a lot. You'll see this with speakers, all right? And I've had to learn how to do this myself. Somebody compliments you for a good homily or for giving a good talk, all right? And the hardest thing is to not let that go to your head. That one time I got a compliment. It was great. And that can be hugely, hugely challenging, because now I think I'm really good. I'm a really good speaker. I'm really good at doing these things. Look at me. I'm better than these other speakers who, look at them. They're stumbling over their words. They don't know how to put a sentence together.
Speakers.
Exactly. But what I need to do is cultivate a sense of humility. So something that I've seen a lot of really great speakers will do is, if you tell them that they did a good job, a lot of Catholic speakers do this. They just, thank God.
Yeah.
They've gotten in the habit of knowing that they have to give it to God right away. They can't, and they're not trying to be falsely humble either. They can't make the talk about themselves. And so if they said something that struck you and you compliment them for it, they might say, thank you for saying that. Praise God that it helped you.
Right.
Right.
So, well, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's something that I've thought about before, in trying to balance, because the fact is, like, maybe you're a good speaker because, you've been super well educated, and you've got lots and lots of practice, having been a priest for as long as you've been, and so speaking publicly is something that you do regularly. Like there are plenty of great reasons that you would be a good public speaker. And so you do deliver a homily that is tremendously impactful on a young person, and they come up to you and they tell you, and your response is rightfully right in this situation. Praise God, I'm so glad it helped you. Well, how much of that was actually you? Basically, my question is like, how much can you take credit for? Because we don't believe that you stepped up to give your sermon, and then your eyes rolled into the back of your head, and your voice changed.
Suddenly, the Spirit spoke through me.
Yeah,
and
you know what I mean.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Like basically what I'm saying is like we as Catholics believe that you cooperated with grace,
Correct.
And so insofar as you're cooperating with grace, that implies that yes, praise God, thank God that impacted you because it was him, but also you cooperated, so it was you too, so like what's the balance there? Because that's something that I've struggled with in the past of like, well, and maybe this is pride where I'm like, how much can I take credit for?
Yeah. To paraphrase friend of the show, Dr. Scott Hahn, Matt, you're putting your finger on something very important here.
Oh, yes.
You're hitting a point that really does need to be made. That is that a key component of humility is knowing what your gifts are.
Right.
And using your gifts and talents, not just for your sake, but for the sake of the other. So putting your gifts and talents in service. And so that might mean that I'm going to prepare well. I'm going to use this gift that I have of an education. I'm going to use this gift that I have of being comfortable in front of a crowd with a microphone in front of me. And I'm going to hone my craft. I'm going to do something with it that will, I hope, help other people.
Right.
And when I know that I have a particular gift in that way, I've got this particular capacity for speaking in front of crowds and for saying something about the gospel. I can tell people about Jesus, and I'm not bad at it. Right.
Right.
Well, if I know
and the Lord happens to use it.
Right.
Like you've seen that.
If I know that I've got that ability, then preparing and getting myself ready, doing my study and everything, that's cooperating with God's grace. That's cooperating with the gift. And then I use it.
You've been given the gift in the first place.
Right. And then when I use it, I realize it's not because of me. It's not because of my stuff. It's not because I was so great at it. It's because I cooperated with this thing that God gave me. You get up to perform music, right?
Yeah.
You have a gift, but you have practiced. You have used that gift throughout your life. You've honed that gift. You've tried to sharpen it and to make it better. And now when you go up and you're performing, or you're using the music that you perform in a ministerial context, it's not for your own sake. It's so that other people can grow. But you also know that there are certain things that you need to do, and you need to be vigilant of. You need to do it the right way. And why are you doing it? For the glory of God, for the salvation of souls, etc. So we're doing these things we're trying to make something good happen. We're trying to make something good come about. And I think that's a really important thing. The gifts that we have, the preparation that we do, that's not pride. That's an honest recognition of the gift that's present.
Right.
St. Paul talks about this, right? When he talks about the different gifts of the Holy Spirit that are given. And he's not talking specifically about pride versus humility, but he is talking about the idea that gifts are given for a reason. And what does he say that in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, what does he say that the gifts are given for? All of the gifts of the Holy Spirit are given for the building up of the body of Christ, the church. And so all the parts of the body can function together, but not all the parts can be the same part.
Right.
They work together in harmony, but the hand cannot say to the eye, I want to do what you do. We need the hand to be the hand. We need the eye to be the eye. And so that's why there are gifts that are given. Some are given the gift to be teachers. Some are given the gift to be preachers. Some are given the gift of service, of administration. some are given other gifts. There's the charismatic
Yeah.
gifts that are given. Some are
Right.
given gifts of healing. Some are given gifts of tongues, whatever it might be.
Yeah, et cetera.
And so, like, I don't need to have the gift of being able to physically heal people in order to still cooperate with God's will and God's plan.
Right.
And I need to be able to rejoice in those people who have been given certain gifts. This is a big thing you learn in seminary. Like, rejoice in the gifts of your brothers. And sometimes it's even like, rejoice that you don't have those gifts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you've brought it up that, like, thank goodness, like, for example, Dr. Nini Hiraman was called to the Biblicum to study
Right.
scripture so in depth in the library, 10 to 12 hours a day. And your response was, thank God.
Yeah.
I have not been called to this.
Yeah, exactly. I am so grateful. But
Right,
what a
right.
gift she is to the church.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes.
And then
Right.
what happens then is she's able to know that she has an expertise in something.
Right.
She has a skill. And she's able to communicate, and she's able to communicate very effectively
Yes.
these truths. But why is she doing it? When we had her on the show, she was talking about using that gift in service to the church to teach seminarians, to help them to grow in their own education. So she'll do that
Right.
work, that hard work in the library, so that these seminarians, future priests, can be properly educated in how to read
Right.
Scripture. Maybe some of them will also be inspired, and God will use her to bring these guys into that scholarship, into that deep
Right.
level, that deep stuff that is really the whole foundation for any kind of evangelization. But then
Right.
again, maybe it's their time in her class that will teach them how to be the best evangelists that they can be. So God's working in these different areas. When we have the humility to recognize this is my gift or this is not my gift, and then also the humility to realize just because God has given me a gift doesn't mean that I can sit back and rest and relax.
Right.
Like, appropriate humility regarding the gifts that God gives to us will then also inspire effort.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah,
work. I'm going to do these things.
Right. It's interesting because humility, I'm not sure if people, I mean, myself included, right? Recognize that humility is really it can be best understood by fully understanding the parable of the talents. That humility demands you not bury your talent. It demands it. So, yeah.
Pride, on the other hand, it's kind of always focused on my own glory, on having my own way.
Mm-hmm. So in the Gospel of John, it says, now I don't remember which chapter it is, but there is, I have to be honest, the accepting of glory to oneself is a direct impediment to faith. And I think that is why, I think that's why Catholic speakers have that like inherent instinct of like, praise be Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
Maybe a better way of saying it is accepting glory to oneself is a direct impediment to giving glory to God, which is like the effect of faith. Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it. Like I skipped a step.
Yeah. Well, I think you're onto something there. It's one thing to be praised for something. Good job. Right? Actually, we all need to hear that sometimes.
Sure.
Like we need to be reassured that what we're doing is
Absolutely.
good, that we're on the right track. Everybody needs like a pat on the back every once in a while.
Oh yeah. We're human. It goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. Michael's too young. He hasn't had a chance to do any of this stuff yet.
Yeah.
But if you never tell him good job,
I will be a terrible dad.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's going to make
Yes,
you a
absolutely.
bad dad.
Yes, absolutely.
There's got to be praise that's given. And we praise people because we want them to know that we appreciate what they've done.
Yeah.
So if you're the one being praised, it's because somebody appreciates something that you've done or wants to encourage you to keep doing the good things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an impediment in and of itself to faith in God, to growing in relationship with God. But when you start to look just for the affirmation, just for the feedback, just for like that dopamine hit that says, they like me, they really like me, they really, really like everything that I'm doing, they think I'm good at it. And then we start looking just constantly for that affirmation, that's when we do start to get into trouble. And then I would add to that if there's that search for praise, for adoration. Like, I want people to think that I'm good. Then I'm taking their praise for myself, and I'm using that as my fuel. I'm not recognizing that I've got a gift that comes to me from God, that through my cooperation with God's grace, I've been able to build upon that gift or that skill. And through that hard work, then God is being glorified, right? This is my cooperation with God. Maybe I don't always think that way, but at the very least, like, I need to know that at the end of the day, this isn't about me. Receiving praise can sometimes make you think it's about me. And that's where the impediment to real faith, or that's where the impediment to a life of virtue really comes in. Because if it's all about me, then I'm never thanking God. I'm never turning to God in thanksgiving. I'm never asking for grace. I'm never asking for help. I become self-reliant. I become self-assured. And self-assured and self-reliant in the worst possible way.
And I'm glad for this distinction, because it's like, I mean, I knew instinctively that didn't mean never tell anyone they did a good job, you know?
Or
like,
never let anyone tell you that you did a good job.
Yeah, you know, like, I know that. But it is also helpful to know, like, well, you should render all of the good things to God, right? Like, that's kind of like Christianity 101, you know? Praise be Jesus Christ. Thank God that this good thing happened, you know? Nonetheless, it does emphasize the need for that humility. Okay. So, what are some practical ways that someone can cultivate the virtue of humility, knowing that it's not these manners of building false humility? It's not well, I stink at this, you know, or like, I'm going to pretend I'm not good at piano, you know. I recognize that I'm pretty good at it. I recognize the Lord has used it in multiple situations. You know, so how do I develop a real sense of humility outside of just saying, well, okay, well, the Lord uses this gift that he's given me, you know, like what are some practices I can personally take up?
Yeah. Well, actually, exactly where you just started. I would say, take a look at...
I'm a genius. I'm so humble.
Brilliant. Yeah, you've put your finger precisely on the point. No, take a look at the things that you have a skill in or a talent in. Like, recognize those places where actually I'm doing well. I'm good at this. And do it with the sense of, I just want to see where are my gifts? Where are my talents? Where are the areas that I can grow? Because when you sort of inventory your life and you recognize these are places that I'm pretty good. I have this skill. Then we can, from there, recognizing a gift or a talent. So whether that's a musical talent, strengths and weaknesses. You know, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And not in the job application. You know, I've got to get ready for a job interview. I'm too committed. I'm too punctual. I care too much about my employees and everything.
Much.
Yeah, that's well. My strengths are, my weaknesses are also my strengths. And you're like, okay, that's dumb. You know, it's great. Congratulations. Okay, good. But let's
wonder
move on
who
to
the
other
first
important
person
things.
to pull that off was in an interview, and how it went over.
Yeah, exactly. But like identifying your genuine strengths and your weaknesses can help you to have right in front of you sort of, all right, I can humbly accept that I'm not good in these areas, or that there's room for me to grow in these areas. And I can also humbly accept that I have a gift. I have a talent in this area or that area, and just acknowledge it. And then having acknowledged it, bring that into your prayer. And you say, God, thank you for this gift. Thank you for giving me a skill and a heart that cares about other people. And so I'm a good cook, and I make good food, and I'm able to share that gift with my friends and with my family. Right? God, thank you for that ability that I have, and that you've put that on my heart. Lord, thank you for making me a good teacher. Thank you for making me a good lawyer, that I'm able to defend people or to fight for justice, right? God, thank you for these gifts that I have. And thank you for just giving me the grace, with whether I recognized it at the time or not, to gain these skills that make me good at these things, right? Because a lot of times we don't even realize at the time that we're doing it that we're gaining skills, and that God, like, we're building on a foundation that God has given to us.
Right.
You know, somebody might decide to go to med school, and they're studying human anatomy, and they have a passion for it. They're interested in it. They don't even realize that They're not consciously doing it because God has told them to, or because
Right.
God has said, I give you the gift of healing and medicine, and so learn these skills. No, they're just doing it because they have a particular passion for it. But then if we can make it something spiritual, we say, all right, Lord, I recognize these gifts now. And now recognizing them, thank you. Just be thankful to God first. Then we might see, what are my weaknesses? God, thank you for my weaknesses.
Oof, that's tough.
Right? But thank
That's
you for
tough.
letting me recognize that these are places where I'm weak. And then we start to ask God for that grace and that help that we need. Like, Lord, do you want me to grow in this area? Or is this going to be kind of a perpetual weakness for me? Is this the cross that I have to carry?
Right.
And Lord, if that's the cross that I have to carry, then give me the grace to accept it, because I don't like that
Yeah.
I'm not good at this thing. I don't like that I'm not
Yeah.
super strong in this.
Yeah.
So again, like the first thing is always going to be to turn to God with that. But having done first maybe that exercise of honest assessment, like self-assessment. And then another thing that can be really helpful with humility is being very deliberate about recognizing the gifts that other people have and the skills that other people have, and telling them. You know, like tell
Right.
them.
You step outside of yourself.
Yeah,
and-
exactly. Tell them that they're good at it, at something, that they've done a good thing, that you appreciate how they've approached something, that they that they did it at all, right? Like tell
Right.
them that you see their goodness, their gift. And I think something very powerful can happen when we do that. Because then what we're also doing is we're putting ourselves in a position that says it's not just me. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. There's somebody else. You ever meet somebody who immediately tells you after talking to you about something, I want you to meet this person. I want you to like get in contact with this guy, because this guy, he's the best at doing this. You should talk to him. And they're trying to make a connection for you.
Right.
And that's it. They make the connection and then they step back. Like
I mean, in a sense, you actually did that at the beginning of this episode with Mother Natalia.
oh, cool. All right.
You know, like
yeah.
you did that.
There's the network, right?
Yeah.
But these networks build up where you start to realize, hey, there's this person over here who can be really helpful. I can't do the thing that you need. I can't fill that role. Maybe I lack the skill, but I know somebody who has that skill.
Right.
And then because I celebrate that skill, because I appreciate that this person has whatever the gift might be, this is the right person to step in here. I think about that a lot with like as a pastor, when we talk about having a parish mission or something like that. I want to bring in good speakers, right? I want somebody who's going to really be able to inspire people. And sometimes I have to think, all right, what kinds of themes do we want to cover? I've heard of this speaker. I know that they would be really good at talking about this thing. So I want them to come in and do it. But other times it's simpler. It's like at a more local level. Hey, we need to do this thing. I know that this person, marriage prep as an example. I use a program called Witness to Love. And with Witness to Love, you pick, the engaged couple can pick a mentor couple.
Right.
Or I can pick a mentor couple for them. So I've had some engaged couples who say, hey, we don't really know anybody. We don't know anybody who would fit the category. Do you know somebody?
Right.
And I connect them with a couple. And it's because I know this couple. I admire them. I think that they've got some great gifts in marriage. Sometimes that couple doesn't understand why I would ask them. Right? They don't,
Really?
Yeah. They're like,
that's
why would you ask
interesting.
me? And like, they ask it in all humility.
Right.
Are you sure you want us to mentor somebody? And inevitably what happens is through the very act of mentoring this engaged couple, the mentor couple realizes that they have a tremendous gift in their marriage.
Right. They've been cultivating something.
Yeah. And then it brings them back. It like refreshes their memory about certain things, and it makes them talk and have certain conversations that maybe have gone dormant, or it reminds them of things. So they start remembering this important stuff that, oh yeah, actually we need to cultivate that, or we've done a good job of that. And so they're feeling affirmed, but not prideful. They're feeling like we've done well, but they're not taking any kind of inordinate pride in the stuff. They're just like, wow, thank God for that. So
And to double down on your comment before of it is good to affirm people, right?
yeah,
If we do that, we're following in the steps of God, who said, "Well done, good and faithful servant," or that's what we hope He'll say, right? You know, like that's not so clearly not a bad thing.
yeah.
And I hope I really wasn't given that impression, because it isn't what I meant.
No.
But I do think it's important, and I think it's something that's lacking.
Yeah, and so when you can recognize somebody else's gifts and talents and like be grateful for them, it can also help you to realize I don't have to do that.
Right.
And when we start to realize it doesn't all depend on me, okay, then we can let go of the pride that says it's all my responsibility.
Right.
It's all about me and what I do. At the same time, we can, in all humility, embrace the things that are our responsibility. There are certain things that I have to do.
Yes.
And even if I don't want to do it, even if it's an unpleasant task, I have to do it. I was thinking about this before, actually.
I'm so glad you're going here. This is where I wanted to go.
Yeah, there are certain things that are, it is my responsibility. And in humility, I take on that responsibility. Because I want what's good for you, because I know that there are certain things that need to happen, I'm going to work in this way. I'm going to say these things. It might not be comfortable. I had a funeral a while back. I don't remember. It must have been like a year or 2 years ago. And a man showed up to the wake. And the family was telling me about this after the fact. A man came to the wake, and he went over and he prayed at the casket, and then he went to greet the family. And he said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And they said, "Oh, thank you. We really appreciate you being here. How did you know Dad?" And he said, "He fired me 30 years ago."
Wow. Oof.
And they got nervous, and he said, then he continued the story. He didn't just leave it like he fired me 30 years ago.
He fired me 30 years
I wanted
ago.
to make
Slammed
sure
the
he was
door.
really dead. You know, it wasn't anything like that. It was,
Yeah.
he fired me 30 years ago, and it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And he like filled them in a little bit on the story. He didn't get into every detail, but he said, basically, I was doing a bad job, and your father challenged me. And when I didn't live up to the challenge, he let me go. And that made me reconsider everything that I was doing, and made me realize that I needed to be more serious about the work that I was going to do, and that I needed to change some of my habits. And because of that, because your dad had the courage to fire me, I went on and had a very successful career, and I'm very grateful that he fired me.
Wow.
And apparently they had kept in contact for a long time after that.
Wow.
Like,
How about that?
There was actually a relationship, it was a professional relationship, not quite a friendship or anything. But here's this man. To fire somebody is no fun. Nobody wants to have to do that, right? And so this man had the role. It was his job to do it. He wanted what was good for this other man who was working for him. He wanted something good for him. He wanted him to succeed professionally. He tried to help him. And when he couldn't, so he had the humility to recognize, I can't help you anymore. I've done everything I can do for you. And since you're not responding to the help that I'm offering you, the only thing for me to do, I have to let you go. I think actually to fire somebody in some cases requires humility.
Right.
Think about it, like if you're the boss and you hired somebody and then they're not doing their job and you have to fire them. Like, it takes humility to say, I was wrong. You weren't the right person for this job.
Right.
Or even to say, I missed something in the interview process. Like, there were things that I should have caught on to and I didn't. I got to let you go. Sometimes it's even like, I have not given you the proper training. I haven't given you enough of what you need. Therefore, this job isn't working out for you. But we're at a point where I can't provide that for you now. I have to let you go. That can take a lot of humility. Other times it's like, no, this is your fault. You have underperformed. You're bad at your job. I have to let you go. But it takes humility. It takes humility, because if we think too much of ourselves, it's like, well, I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want them to hate me. I don't want them to think that I'm not good, or that I'm a mean person. I don't want to be disliked. And so out of concern, I'm just going to let everything continue to happen.
Right.
That's pride.
Certainly.
You know?
I mean, and so that's a great example from the workplace. and is a challenge, I think, to anyone who has a job, which is like you are required to live up to a certain expectation. But it's interesting because I wonder if that humility, right, that humility that demands that you have responsibilities is one of the reasons there is in our society at large, right, our culture at large, like a crisis in fatherhood and in motherhood, which is you have certain responsibilities and we've lost track of those responsibilities. So and I actually would even broaden it out to priests and the episcopacy, and the idea that there are certain responsibilities that belong to different groups of people in the church.
Yeah.
Like the laity, our job is to go out, and I actually think that we do a pretty dang good job of that. Like I think that there are plenty of examples of laity going out and spreading the gospel, and there are definitely plenty of examples of bishops too. I'm not trying to rip on like the bishops at large,
Go ahead.
But the point is that, did you say go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
but the point is that I heard this example once, admittedly on Pints with Aquinas. So Pints with Aquinas is getting plenty of shout outs on today's episode.
Well deserved, by the way.
Which they deserve, yeah.
Well deserved.
About a bishop who allowed his ring to be kissed, and how that was actually an act of humility because he was recognizing the office that he held, and the responsibility that came with it.
Yeah, it's not about him.
It's not about him.
It's not his ring. It's the bishop's ring.
Right. Right.
It happens to be on his hand.
Sure. And it's probably more of a burden than a blessing. Yeah. I mean, maybe the burden is the blessing. I mean, we would have to ask that particular bishop, of whom I don't know who it was. But the point is that that call to responsibility is a blessing. And so my question for you is this: in your experience, what are those acts of humility that go with particular vocations, right? So what's the act of humility that goes with being a mother, being a father, like from the pastor's point of view? And then what's the act of humility that, excuse me, comes with being a pastor or a bishop,
Yeah.
I know that's a loaded question with like 8 different ways you can go.
There's a lot there that it's going to also require some self-humiliation here. Right.
Okay.
And like the confession of my own weaknesses and inabilities.
Sure.
Right. So,
sure. Well, I'll tell you the advice you told me at the beginning, which is you don't have to confess your sins on the air.
Yeah. Very true. So I think if I'm looking out at my parish, if I'm looking out at the parishioners, it's humbling for me to see how humbly people receive certain things. Like I've witnessed people change some of their practice because I've made a suggestion. Sometimes because I've made an instruction.
I see.
Right? So sometimes I have to instruct. This is what we do. Full stop. Like this is the rule.
Right.
Other times I've made a suggestion. Maybe consider doing this. And I'm saying that like broadly, not specifically to one person or another, but I might offer a suggestion, like things that we might do. And then to see how people do it. And that humbles me, but I realize that they had the humility to take my suggestion seriously.
Right.
There's a temptation, I think, whenever you're a priest in a parish that has a fairly well-educated population, to think that you don't really have anything to offer them. These people have degrees that I could never get. They have jobs that I will never ever qualify for. I don't belong in their halls of power, right? The things that they do. And then to realize that actually I do have something to offer to them, which is a knowledge of the faith and the spiritual life. Praise God, I can share that with them. I can encourage them. I can teach them. I can suggest things to them. But thank God also that they have the humility to receive it. That they don't take on this notion of, well, you know what, I've got plenty of degrees. Let me tell you how it is, Father. Or I've got all this experience. You should really get on board with me. They're willing to receive something. And that's so powerful. And so I see that humility as one example. But I look at parents and the humility of parents. I am struck whenever I see parents, like across the board. I know some of these parents. I know who they are. Like I know I know their background. Some of them I've known since before they were married. I now have the gift, as I've been a priest long enough, that I've baptized the children or several of the children of marriages that I officiated at.
Right.
I was the priest at the wedding, and now here's a bunch of the babies that I've baptized as a result.
Right.
And there's a beauty to that, right? But to see some of these parents, like let their kids climb all over them. And these are people who are lawyers and doctors and professors.
Fairly dignified people.
Exactly. But they allow their kids to do this, or to watch them play with their kids. Like to watch them like roll around on the floor and goof around with their kids and be silly with their kids. It's very, very powerful, because you see that there's humility there. They're not taking themselves too seriously. They're not saying this is beneath me, to play with my children is beneath me, to be silly, to use a silly voice, to let my kids do this stuff. There's dad and his daughter is putting, hair clips in his hair and stuff. And that's not beneath him. He's willing to let that happen. He's willing to participate. He's willing to play with the kids. Like, that's humility.
It is because it demands. I mean, listen, there's a lot of joy in playing with your children, but you are dying to yourself when you do it, in the sense that, like, the easy thing to focus in on is like, I got up at 2 a.m. and changed a diaper, and by I mean Renee, but like you're an adult who has your own interests, Like sometimes I'd rather read than play with my son, and of course I'm not trying to like sit on the podcast and be like, look at how humble I am. But the point being like you really do have to choose that, and the reason that I choose that is because I actually think I'm responsible to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, and you can't pass up on that. Like, that's so fundamental to their development, like there is a real obligation there. That is a blessing. I'm not saying it's not a blessing.
Yeah.
Like, it's awesome that I play catch with my 11-month-old son, and he now knows how to catch, because he is going to be an MLB player. And he will have humility when he does it.
No, that's a reasonable expectation to put on your son, especially given your height and Renee's height. It's a reasonable expectation.
Hey, my brother-in-law played college ball. Okay,
sure.
It's in the family.
Yeah.
Sort of, because college ball is an MLB, but like the point is that there is that real obligation, and I do think, when possible, like recognizing there are external situations, like some people are in financial situations where both parents have to work, have to work, or you are not going to eat, in which case, like, going to work and working those extra hours, that's an act of humility,
Absolutely.
Even though you have to pick that over, well, I would love to play catch with my kid, but if I don't go to work for the second job, my son won't be able to eat. But then also, like, well, if you're in a situation that is, financially freeing, I guess, the humility of saying, well, instead of going and making an extra $50,000 this year, even though I know, like, sure, maybe we could go on cooler vacations, it's actually an act of humility to say, you know what, one of us is going to stay home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's obviously humility has to be fit into like the individual person's life.
Mm-hmm.
Duh, because that's how everything else works. Welcome to the real world, Matt. But the point is, I guess humility really is based in that definition of love we said. It's willing the good of the other for the other.
Yeah.
And usually that implies, well, I'm going to deny myself.
Yeah. Well, so if I were to look at the clergy then, I would say
please.
that a place where humility is actually really hard for priests, for deacons, for bishops, is precisely in the area of making the hard decisions, because sometimes those hard decisions or doing the hard thing, like we're trained pretty well to sacrifice ourselves, put in the extra hours. We can do that. Be radically available to people. Like we can do all of that. That's not all that difficult for us. But we've also kind of, I think as a church, I think bishops have kind of adopted this, and many bishops have kind of then put it on their priests, and so priests are afraid of different things. But most of all, it's the idea that if you do something, if you stand firm on something, somehow that is not being pastorally sensitive. And so we're so afraid of driving people away that we forget to call people in. Like to gather people, to draw them in with something, to give them something solid. Like we're so afraid that we're going to turn them away that we've actually let them loose.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. If you think about
my experience.
Yeah. Think about a lot of our laxity in the church about liturgy.
Right.
And what does it tell you? Well, if we're lax about doing the things that the church actually requires us to do, if we get really inventive, or we let everybody else get really inventive about things, what happens? Well, at a certain point, Mass is whatever I want it to be. Individual, like and I don't mean me, Father Sam. I mean like the theoretical individual can just say, Mass can be whatever I want it to be, and I can get whatever I want out of it, and I can put whatever I want into it, and nobody can tell me otherwise. Well, what we've actually done then is said, Mass doesn't really matter that much. The liturgy doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
And then, why would somebody go? Why would somebody go to Mass if it's whatever they want it to be? They stop seeing the need for Mass, right?
Right.
But then we're afraid that if we put our foot down on anything and say, this is the right way, this is what the church actually tells us to do, well, that's going to drive people away. That's going to turn them away from the church. Actually, it's actually kind of the contrary.
Right.
When you say this is what we do, people feel a certain esteem for it. They're kind of called to at least respect the fact that this is the practice. This is the thing that we do. You might not like it. It might not strike your fancy. This might not be the thing that most meaningfully impacts your heart. But if it's the thing that the church does, then I'm going to have to do it. Or at least I have to respect that the church does it. And maybe I sit there quietly while it's being performed, but I want to have at least that, I recognize that dignity, right? So I think a lot of times priests are very concerned about pleasing everybody. Most priests, I would say, have a pretty strong people-pleasing tendency, right? I want people to be happy. I want people to like me. Because if people...
I think that extends to lots of people.
It sure does,
not just
yeah,
priests.
Right. But if people like me, then when I talk about the gospel, when I talk about Jesus, they might like Jesus too.
Right.
But of
and
course,
that's, you know what? That's not a, like, it's maybe a flawed tendency, but it's a good
it's a good desire at the heart. It's a good desire. But what then can become part of the problem? Well, I want people to like me. So maybe I won't talk about something that's challenging. I won't challenge somebody too much on their moral life, or I won't speak in a homily about maybe difficult subjects, because I want people to like me. Now, it's notoriously difficult in homilies to preach on all of the difficult topics, because you do actually have to be sensitive to the people who are there. Like if there's lots of children, there are certain topics that you shouldn't bring up in a homily. And that's because...
Or at least, you know, use bigger words.
Yeah, exactly.
So they don't
Sometimes
get it.
you have to talk around certain things, because you don't want kids to get the wrong message, or to be asking questions that their parents aren't ready for them to, or aren't age appropriate for them. Like you got to be careful. Okay, that's all fine. But this tendency, I just want people to like me. Maybe then I shy away from the harder stuff. Right. You know, the important things. I think likewise, bishops can struggle with similar things. They want to be liked, and so they get a complaint about a priest. A priest says or does something that, again, like a priest tries to do the right thing, says Mass according to the rubrics, and somebody who likes the way the old pastor who didn't care does things calls the bishop and complains that the new pastor isn't telling us to hold hands at the Our Father. And
Right.
I don't like that. It's very mean.
Right.
And so the bishop calls the priest and says, hey, we got this complaint about you. You're not being pastorally sensitive. So now there's a rupture between the bishop and the priest.
Right.
If the bishop instead had some courage and was able to say, there's no reason for people to hold hands at the Our Father,
Right.
or at least to say
That's not in the book.
the church
It's not in the
doesn't
rubric.
dictate that the priest should instruct people to do that. So by not instructing you to hold hands, he's doing the right thing. If you want to hold hands,
Right.
I don't really care. You're very welcome to hold hands with people.
By all means.
Go for it. That's
Hold
fine.
hands.
If that's helping you, then that's fine.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not the priest's obligation or job to
Right.
tell you that you have to hold hands, right?
Right.
If the bishop can instruct and then protect his priest in that way, like shield him from something that's unnecessary, an unnecessary criticism or something, it can go a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
way. But again, a lot of times bishops want to be liked.
By the people.
By the people. I think, we're also living in a time when there's a separation between bishops and priests. It's not entirely because of the Dallas Charter, but it's certainly
What
not.
is the Dallas Charter
the-
for our listeners?
Yeah, the Dallas Charter in 2002.
Our listeners.
Yeah, the Dallas Charter in 2002 was instituted for the protection of minors as a response to the sexual abuse crisis.
Sure. Sure.
But the Dallas Charter basically puts priests and bishops at odds with one another, and so
Really?
the big critique of the Dallas Charter was there's since been correction to it and everything, but the big critique was that the bishop was no longer a spiritual father, but was rather an overseer, an employer, and a disciplinarian, and the bishops themselves were not being held to the same standard as the priests.
Right.
So
right.
a priest could
Which
be
is-
accused of something and immediately removed from ministry, whereas a bishop didn't have to withdraw from ministry if there was an accusation. So there was an inequality, and there's an inequality in rank, of course, between
fair
bishops
enough.
and priests. Fair, right? But it set up this divide, and
Yeah.
there's the recent study from the Catholic Project at Catholic University of America that shows that the relationship between priests and their bishops is very frayed in a lot of ways, and that's a huge wound in the life of the church.
Yes,
Well,
definitely.
An area that then has to be given attention is the idea of rupture and repair. You talk about this a lot in like psychology and in healing ministry. Dr. Bob Schutz, I think, talks about this quite a bit. That if there's a break, if something happens, there's a repair that needs to take place also. So if I offend you, Matt, I have to say, Matt, I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
Thanks. But by that offense, then I'm acknowledging my fault. I'm acknowledging the thing that I did, and let's repair it. Let's fix this.
Right.
And
Right.
let's be together again. Let's work on this together.
Right.
But a lot of times there's only rupture between priests and their bishops. This isn't all the time. I don't want to speak too generally, but
No,
it is
sure,
not an
sure.
uncommon experience for a priest to be, if not formally disciplined, like at least verbally disciplined by his bishop about something, but there's no movement towards repair. Like the priest now carries in the mind of his bishop that stigma. All right, I had to tell Father so-and-so this thing. Father so-and-so is this kind of priest.
Oof.
And there's not or the priest thinks the bishop only thinks of me in these terms. The bishop thinks that I'm this way, and he only thinks of me that way because he's never expressed to me that he sees me in any other capacity, that he sees me in any other way. And so this small flaw of mine, or this
Is
moment where
primary.
or this moment where maybe I didn't succeed. It could be something as simple as like, here's a priest and he has to make his bishop's appeal goal, and he didn't make the bishop's appeal goal. And he starts to worry. The bishop thinks that I'm not a capable fundraiser. Right? Well, I tried. I did my best, and we fell short. But if the bishop is critical of priests for not making their appeal goal, and I'm saying a theoretical bishop, I am absolutely not speaking of my bishop. Let me make that very clear. I'm not speaking about Bishop Caggiano at all.
I knew that, but yes.
But like, it can be really easy to think that's the whole way that he sees me. So if there can be rupture and repair, like acknowledgement of the flaws and repair, that's humility.
Right.
That's where humility really comes into the priesthood, really comes into the presbyterate in relationship with the bishop. That's where we can cultivate something really beautiful. But what happens? Pride gets into the presbyterate. I won't talk to my bishop about this because I'm going to handle it myself. Or I've already decided that my bishop is a certain way, just as it can go both ways. It's not just that the bishop might think that his priest is a certain way. The priest might think that his bishop is a certain way. I'm not even going to address it with him. I'm not even going to talk to him about it. I already know what he thinks. I already know what he's like. Or it could simply be like the idea that I have to do it all myself. I can't ask the bishop for help. I can't possibly rely on him to assist me. Or you might find like a bishop who decides, I can't ask my priests to do anything. I'm going to do this myself. I'll take care of it. But again, that's where pride has come in. But good humility is recognizing, here's the gifts and talents that are available. And this priest is able to do this thing. This priest can take care of this kind of need in a parish setting. So I want to ask him to step into that. This priest has an expertise in this area. I want him to help me with this project. With brother priests, right? Like to know this guy can do this thing, and I've got to rely on him for that. Like I have a couple of go-to priests. When certain questions come up, especially about spiritual warfare, I text or call them right away because I don't know what I'm doing with some of that stuff.
Right.
But I know that they know, and I take their advice very seriously. Right. There's other guys who I know who just have a knack for decision making, and if I'm stuck in a spot, I want to call them and find out what should I do.
Right.
But I also recognize in myself a tendency towards people pleasing. I want people to be real happy with me, and so I might be slow to make decisions that need to be made because I'm trying to manage like everybody liking me. And so I end up stuck in doing nothing, which means nobody likes me.
Man, that backfired.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes that's my pride getting in the way.
Right, for sure.
I can be stubborn. I've got an idea. I want it to go this way, and I won't let go of it. I can be willful, right? All of these things, and I think any of us who's really honest will recognize that we have these tendencies, whether priest, layperson, whatever it might be. We're going to recognize these things in ourselves.
Yeah.
So the Litany of Humility is one of the great prayers of the church, great devotionals that's available to us.
The Thomistic Litany of Humility is great as well. I don't know if you've ever read that one.
No, I don't think so.
Or prayed that one. Yeah, there's some lines in the Thomistic Litany of Humility that are like a punch in the gut.
Sweet.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay.
So good.
Well, we might have to put that. We might have to put that in the show notes. Yeah. No, but the Litany of Humility is really powerful because as you pray it, you start realizing some of the stuff that you're praying for, that others may be praised and I go unnoticed. Like let other people receive the glory, even if it means that I don't get anything, if I don't get the credit. The one that always got me, and I remember my vocation director when I was in the seminary saying this, he goes, it bothered him too. And so I think I took a cue from his book, Monsignor Chris Walsh. He said that others become holier than I, provided that I become as holy as I should.
Yeah.
Like, no, shouldn't I want to be the holiest one?
Right. Oh.
And I'm like, no, I want to be, I want others to become holy, not just my own. I want my own holiness.
It's not about me.
But at the end, it's not about me. Yeah. So that humility helps us to, combat the unhealthy pride, but bringing it back. All right. I want to have pride like my mother has, not like the pride in the Bible that turns you bad. So the Avett brothers are singing about their own mother, who's proud of them for what they did, and proud of her family, proud of her home, but not in a self-centered way.
Yeah.
Like appropriate levels of pride. Like, look at what you've done. Look at this good stuff. Look at these good things that I've been able to accomplish. I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to do these things. But it's with gratitude in my heart that I can be grateful. It's with gratitude in my heart that I can be grateful. That's a stupid thing to say. With gratitude in my heart that I can acknowledge these things, that I can celebrate them, and that I can then seek to do more.
Great.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
all the good stuff that you do.
I feel the same way, Father.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm gonna put an "aww"
Yeah,
sound
a
effect.
whole
in there.
audience awe sound effect. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, this was helpful for me.
Good.
Because I happen to benefit from that kind of clear-cut instruction of like, pray the litany of humility. You know, open up to the responsibilities of your vocation. You know, and I think that we hit a couple of things like that in this episode. So I personally benefited from it. And I hope our listeners do as well.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
All right. I'll see you later, buddy.
All right. You got it.
Peace.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to further support The Tangent, please consider subscribing or following on your preferred platform, following us at @thetangent_Catholic on Instagram, or even donating at veritascatholic.com. See you next time. God bless.